My grandson introduced me as his maid to his friends. But later that day, he learned who truly owned the house. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I never thought I'd be writing this. For 73 years, I believed that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, and that the love you pour into raising children would always come back to you somehow. I built my entire life on that foundation. But last Tuesday afternoon, as I stood in my own kitchen, holding a tray of sandwiches I'd made for my grandson's friends, I heard words that shattered everything I thought I knew about the boy I'd helped raise. Let me start from the beginning, because to understand how much those words hurt, you need to know the whole story. My name is Margaret Chen, though most people call me Maggie. I came to this country 60 years ago with nothing but a suitcase, my husband Robert, and a dream that our children would have better lives than we did. Robert worked in construction, and I cleaned houses during the day and took in sewing at night. We saved every penny we could, living in a tiny apartment that smelled like mildew and had cockroaches that no amount of cleaning could completely eliminate. For 15 years, we saved. We didn't go to restaurants. We didn't take vacations. When my dresses wore thin, I mended them rather than buying new ones. When Robert's shoes developed holes, he put cardboard inside them and kept wearing them. People thought we were cheap, maybe even miserable. But we had a vision that kept us warm through those cold nights in that drafty apartment. We were going to build a house, not just any house, but a real home where our family could grow and thrive for generations. In 1985, we finally had enough for a down payment on a piece of land on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just a quarter-acre on a street that didn't even have sidewalks yet, but it was ours. Robert and I would drive out there on Sundays, walking the perimeter of our little plot, planning where each room would go, where we'd plant a garden, where our grandchildren would someday play. Robert did most of the construction work himself, with help from his brothers and friends from the old country. I worked alongside them when I could, learning to paint, to lay tile, to install fixtures. My hands, which had always been soft despite years of cleaning other people's homes, became calloused and strong. I remember the first time I hammered a nail straight through in one strike. Robert looked at me with such pride and said, "You're tougher than any man on this crew, Maggie." It took us 3 years to finish the house, 3 years of working full-time jobs and then coming to the property to work until dark. 3 years of scraped knuckles, sore backs, and exhaustion so deep that some nights I fell asleep at the dinner table. But in 1988, we moved in. I'll never forget that first night. We had no furniture except a mattress on the floor and a card table with 2 folding chairs, but we had our own home. Robert and I sat on the front steps as the sun set, watching the sky turn pink and orange, and I cried. Not sad tears, but tears of pure accomplishment. We had done it. We had built something permanent, something that would outlast us. Our daughter Susan was 22 then, newly married to a man named David. They were living in a cramped apartment downtown, struggling like we once did. When we finished the house, we told Susan they should move in with us for a while, just until they got on their feet. That while turned into 3 years, and I'm grateful for every moment. Those were the years I got to see my daughter become a mother herself. Daniel, my grandson, was born in this house, right there in the upstairs bedroom that faces the street. Susan's labor came on fast one summer evening, and the ambulance couldn't get there in time. Robert called 911 while I held Susan's hand and talked her through it, the way women have been doing for thousands of years. Daniel came into this world at 11:47 p.m., screaming with healthy lungs, and I was the first person besides his mother to hold him. I looked into those tiny dark eyes and made him a silent promise. I would always be there for him. I would always protect him. I would give him everything I could to make his life easier than mine had been. For the first 5 years of Daniel's life, Susan and David lived with us. I watched Daniel take his first steps in the living room, holding on to the coffee table that Robert had built from reclaimed wood. I heard him say his first word, "Mama," while sitting in the kitchen as I made soup. I was there for every fever, every scraped knee, every nightmare that sent him running to find comfort. When Susan and David finally saved enough to move into their own place, it was only 10 minutes away. Daniel spent almost as much time at our house as he did at his own. Every day after school, Susan would drop him off at our place while she and David worked. I'd have snacks waiting, milk and cookies, or fruit with peanut butter, and I'd sit with him at the kitchen table while he did his homework. Those were some of the happiest years of my life. Daniel would tell me about his day, about the kids at school, about his teachers. We'd work through math problems together, and I'd help him practice his spelling words. When he struggled with reading, I sat with him every single afternoon for an entire school year, patiently working through books until he finally broke through, and suddenly everything made sense to him. "You did it, Danny!" I remember crying out when he read an entire chapter without help. He looked up at me with such pride and joy, and I felt my heart might burst. Robert and I weren't wealthy, but we always made sure Daniel had what he needed. When his school required a uniform, we bought it. When he wanted to join the soccer team, we paid the fees. When his 7th grade class went on a field trip to Washington, D.C., and David and Susan couldn't afford to send him, Robert and I covered the cost without even telling them. We just told Daniel to have a wonderful time and bring us back a postcard. Robert died when Daniel was 14. A heart attack, sudden and cruel. One moment he was working in the garden, planting tomatoes, and the next he was gone. I found him there among the soil and seedlings, and something in me broke that day that has never fully healed. Daniel was devastated. He'd adored his grandfather. For months after the funeral, Daniel would come over after school and just sit with me in silence. We'd drink tea together, not saying much, just being present for each other's grief. I thought it brought us closer. I thought he understood that family stays together through the hard times. After Robert died, Susan suggested I sell the house. "It's too big for you alone, Mom," she said. "You could get a nice apartment, something easier to maintain. Use the money to enjoy your retirement." But I couldn't. This house wasn't just wood and brick to me. It was Robert's hands on every beam. It was the sound of baby Daniel's laughter echoing through the rooms. It was every memory of our family's life together, all contained within these walls. Besides, I told myself, maybe someday Daniel or his future siblings would need a place to live. Maybe one day Daniel's children would take their first steps on this floor, just like their father had. I stayed. And Daniel kept coming over, though less frequently as he got older. High school brought new activities, new friends, new interests. I understood. Boys his age needed their independence. But he still came for dinner every Sunday, and we still had our special bond. Or so I thought. When Daniel started high school at a prestigious preparatory academy, I noticed changes. He started correcting my English, which had always been accented and imperfect. He seemed embarrassed when I picked him up from school in my old car, asking if I could park around the corner instead of in front. Once, when one of his friends called while he was at my house, I heard him say he was at a family friend's place rather than at grandma's. Small things, easy to rationalize. He's just being a teenager, I told myself. He's trying to figure out who he is. It's normal. Susan mentioned that Daniel had made friends with some wealthy kids at his school. "I worry about him sometimes," she told me over tea one afternoon. "These kids, their families, have so much money. Daniel's starting to feel self-conscious about our background. The other day, he asked David if we could move to a different neighborhood." "He's just going through a phase," I assured her, though I felt a small knot of worry forming in my stomach. He'll grow out of it. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it. Daniel got into an excellent university, and I was so proud. The day his acceptance letter came, I cried tears of joy. Everything Robert and I had worked for, all those years of sacrifice, had led to this moment. Our grandson was going to have opportunities we'd only dreamed of. I helped pay for his first year. Susan and David were doing okay, but college was expensive, and I had money saved. Money that I'd planned to use for, well, I wasn't sure what. But helping Daniel seemed like the best possible use of it. He was my investment in the future. He was proof that our family's story was one of progress, of each generation doing better than the last. During college, Daniel came home less often. Too busy with studies, with internships, with his new college friends. I understood. When he did visit, he seemed distracted. Always on his phone, always rushing off to meet people I never got to know. But he still hugged me and called me Grandma. And that was enough. Last year, Daniel graduated and got a job at a prestigious consulting firm downtown. Susan told me he was making more money than she and David combined. I was so proud, but also a little sad. My little boy was all grown up, entering a world I didn't fully understand, a world of business suits and corporate lunches and networking events. He moved into an apartment in the trendy part of the city, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that looked uncomfortable, but apparently was very expensive. When I visited once, I felt out of place among all that minimalist elegance, like my very presence was cluttering up his carefully curated space. But he still called me sometimes. Not as often as I'd like, but enough. And once in a while, he'd stop by the house. Usually when he needed something, I started to notice. He'd need to borrow a tool, or need me to hem a pair of pants, or need advice on how to cook something basic, because he'd been eating takeout too much. Last month, Daniel called me on a Tuesday evening. "Hey, Grandma," he said, and I could hear something in his voice. Not warmth exactly, but a kind of strained cheerfulness. "I have a favor to ask." "Of course, Danny, anything." "So, I have these friends from work, and we've been getting together to watch football games on Sundays. We've been rotating whose place we meet at, and it's my turn this weekend. But my apartment is being fumigated for a possible bedbug situation. My neighbor's problem, not mine. But the whole building has to be treated." "Oh no, that sounds stressful." "Yeah, it's annoying. But anyway, I was wondering if maybe we could use your place this Sunday, just for a few hours. I'd bring all the food and drinks. You wouldn't have to do anything. I just need a space with a TV and a couch." My heart swelled. He wanted to bring his friends here, to the house, to the home that Robert and I built. Finally, I'd get to meet the people in his new life. Finally, he'd share this part of himself with me. "Of course," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "I'd be honored. And don't be silly about bringing food. I'll make snacks. I'll make my dumplings. Everyone loves those." "Oh, Grandma, you don't have to." "I want to. It'll be fun. What time should I expect you?" He hesitated, then said, "Around 1. "And Grandma?" "It'll probably just be guys, watching the game and being loud. You might want to. I don't know, maybe go out for the afternoon? Visit Aunt Susan or something, so we don't disturb you?" I should have heard the warning in those words, but I didn't. I only heard a grandson who was concerned about bothering me, who wanted me to be comfortable. "Don't be ridiculous," I said. "This is my house. I'll stay out of your way, but I'm not leaving. I want to meet your friends." Another hesitation. "Okay. Sure, that's fine. See you Sunday." I spent the rest of the week preparing. I cleaned the house top to bottom, even though it was already quite clean. I went to the Asian grocery store and bought ingredients for dumplings, for spring rolls, for all the foods Daniel had loved as a child. I made sure there were plenty of cold drinks in the refrigerator. I set up the living room so the TV was positioned perfectly for viewing, with enough seating for several people. Susan called me on Saturday. "Mom, Daniel mentioned he's coming over tomorrow with friends." "Yes, I'm so excited to meet them." There was a long pause. "Mom, I'm worried. Daniel said something odd to me the other day. He was talking about his work friends, and he mentioned that they don't really know much about his background. I think he's been embellishing things. What do you mean? I mean, I don't think he's told them we're a working-class family. I think he's let them believe we're wealthier than we are. More. I don't know. Important, maybe. Susan, that's ridiculous. Why would he do that? I don't know, Mom, but just be prepared, okay? In case he acts differently around them. I laughed it off. My Daniel wouldn't be ashamed of us. He couldn't be. Not after everything we'd been through together. Not after all the love we'd shared. Sunday arrived sunny and warm. I woke up early and started cooking. By noon, I had trays of dumplings, spring rolls, chicken wings, and vegetable skewers ready. The house smelled wonderful, like the kitchen of my childhood, like home. At 12:45, Daniel arrived. Alone. He walked in, and immediately his face fell. Grandma, what is all this? Food for your friends. I made your favorites. I told you that you didn't need to do this. His voice had an edge I didn't recognize. I wanted to. It's no trouble. I've been cooking since 6 this morning. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. Grandma, listen, my friends. They're not really the dumpling type, okay? They're more into pizza and wings, American food. I made wings, and there are vegetable. These are Chinese wings. That's not the same thing. I felt my first flutter of unease. Danny, what's wrong? Why are you acting like this? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Calculation. He was trying to figure out how to say something. Grandma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to not make it a big deal, okay? What is it? My friends. They're going to be here soon, and I was thinking, maybe it would be easier if you just, I don't know, let me handle everything? Like, you could stay in your room or something. You don't need to meet them or anything. The words hit me like cold water. You don't want me to meet your friends? It's not that. It's just, they're my colleagues, really. Professional acquaintances. It's not like a family thing. It would just be awkward. Awkward, I repeated slowly. You know what I mean. They're from work. We talk about work stuff. You wouldn't be interested in any of it. I should have argued. I should have insisted that this was my home, and I had every right to be present in it. But old habits die hard, and I'd spent my whole life accommodating, putting others first, not making waves. All right, I heard myself say. I'll stay in the kitchen, but I'm putting the food out. You can tell them you ordered it, or whatever you need to say. Relief washed over his face. Thanks, Grandma. You're the best. He kissed my cheek quickly, and I felt the absence of warmth in it. At 1 o'clock, they started arriving. 3 young men, all dressed in expensive casual clothes, the kind that looks simple but costs more than my monthly grocery budget. They were loud and confident, filling the space with their presence and their laughter. I watched from the kitchen as Daniel greeted them, playing the host in my living room. He'd positioned himself in front of the photographs on the mantel, the ones of him as a baby, the ones of Robert and me, blocking them from view. Bro, this place is awesome, one of them said, looking around. I didn't know you had a house out here. Yeah, Daniel said vaguely. Family property. Family property. Technically true, but the way he said it made it sound like he came from old money, like this house had been in the family for generations, like we were the kind of people who owned multiple properties. I arranged the food on platters and brought them out. The young men were settling into the couches, making themselves comfortable in the home that Robert and I had built with our own hands. Food's here, I said quietly, setting the trays on the coffee table. They looked up at me, and I saw their eyes take me in. An old Asian woman in a simple blouse and slacks. I saw them make assumptions about who I was and why I was there. Thanks, one of them said absently, already turning back to the TV. I looked at Daniel, expecting him to introduce me. This was the moment. He'd say, "This is my grandmother, the woman who raised me, who helped build this house, who made all this food for you." But he didn't. Instead, he avoided my eyes and said, Thanks for bringing that out. Thanks for bringing that out. As if I were serving them. As if I were staff. I stood there for a moment, frozen, waiting for him to correct it. He didn't. Daniel, I said softly, aren't you going to— We're good, thanks, he said, cutting me off. His tone was dismissive, the way you'd dismiss someone whose presence you no longer required. One of the friends, the tallest one with blonde hair, looked at me more carefully. Do you work for Daniel's family? Before I could respond, before I could process what was happening, Daniel spoke. She helps out around here. Family friend. She's been with us for years. She helps out around here. She's been with us for years. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking me. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. He'd reduced me from his grandmother, his family, his flesh and blood, to help. To a maid. To someone who was with the family, but not of the family. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the boy I'd rocked to sleep. This wasn't the child I'd taught to read. This wasn't the teenager I'd comforted when his grandfather died. This was a man who was ashamed of me, ashamed of where he came from, ashamed of the very people who had sacrificed everything so he could become this person who was now pretending they didn't exist. The blonde friend nodded at me with a smile that was polite but distant. Nice to meet you. These dumplings look amazing. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. You can go now, Daniel said, not looking at me. We'll clean up after ourselves. I don't remember walking back to the kitchen. I don't remember what happened in the next few minutes. I think I stood at the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to breathe through the pain that was radiating from my chest. She helps out around here. She's been with us for years. I could hear them in the living room, laughing and shouting at the game, eating the food I'd woken up at dawn to prepare. In my own house. The house Robert and I built. The house where Daniel was born. The house filled with every memory of our family's life together. And Daniel had turned me into the help. I thought about Susan's warning. She'd known. She'd tried to tell me. But I hadn't wanted to believe it. How long had this been going on? How many times had Daniel omitted me from his stories, erased me from his history, rewritten his life story to exclude the people who had given him everything? I looked around the kitchen, at the pot where I'd made soup for him when he was sick, at the chair where he'd sat doing homework every day for years, at the window where I'd watched him play in the backyard, where I'd waved to him as he left for his first day of school, of middle school, of high school. This was my house, mine and Robert's. We'd earned every square inch of it with our sweat and our sacrifice. Daniel had been born here, raised here, loved here. And now he was pretending it was his, or his family's in some vague, inherited way, and that I was merely someone who helped out. Something hardened in me then. Something I didn't know I had a core of steel beneath all the softness, all the accommodating, all the maternal self-sacrifice. I walked to my bedroom and found the lockbox, where I kept important documents. Birth certificates, marriage certificate, Robert's death certificate, and there, at the bottom, the deed to the house. The house was in my name. Only my name now since Robert passed. Daniel had no legal claim to it whatsoever. This wasn't family property in the way he'd implied. This was my property. I pulled out the deed and looked at it. Margaret Chen. Owner. I heard more laughter from the living room. They were having a wonderful time, these young men, in my home, eating my food, enjoying my hospitality, while the grandson I'd loved more than my own life erased me from existence to make himself seem more important. I walked back to the living room. The game was at halftime, and they were all talking, relaxed and happy. "Excuse me," I said. They looked up, seeming surprised I was still there. "I need to speak with Daniel, privately." Daniel's face tightened with annoyance. "Grandma, we're in the middle of—" "Grandma?" The blonde friend looked confused. "I thought you said she was a family friend?" The room went very quiet. "I am his grandmother," I said clearly. in the English that Daniel had always corrected, the English that carried the accent of my homeland, but communicated perfectly well nonetheless. I am his grandmother, and this is my house. Your house? Another friend, this one with dark hair and glasses, looked genuinely confused. Daniel said this was his family's. It is his family's house, I said. It is my house. I am his family, his grandmother, the one who helped raise him, the one who paid for part of his college education, the one who built this house with her husband, with their own hands, and watched this boy grow up in it. Daniel stood up, his face red. Grandma, what are you doing? I am telling the truth, Daniel. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. I held up the deed. This house is in my name, mine alone. Your grandfather and I bought this land in 1985. We built this house over 3 years while working full-time jobs. Your mother and father lived here when you were born. You were born in the bedroom upstairs. You took your first steps in this living room. And I have been here every day since, maintaining it, paying for it, living in it. The friends were staring at Daniel, who looked like he wanted to disappear. When you called me last week, I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling I felt inside. You asked if you could use my house for your gathering. I said yes, because I love you. Because I have always said yes to you. I spent all week cooking food for your friends. I got up at 6 this morning to make dumplings and spring rolls and all the dishes you loved as a child. And when I brought them out, you introduced me as someone who helps out around here. As if I am your maid. As if I am not the woman who held you when you were born, who bandaged your scraped knees, who sat with you every day to help you learn to read, who held your hand at your grandfather's funeral. Dude, the blonde friend said quietly to Daniel. What the hell? You are embarrassed of me, I said, and my voice broke slightly. You are embarrassed of your family, of where you came from, of the fact that we were poor immigrants who worked with our hands. You want your friends to think you come from money, from importance, from something better than what you actually are. That's not, Daniel started. Don't lie to me anymore, Daniel. I have accepted many things from you. I have accepted being forgotten, being neglected, being taken for granted. But I will not accept being erased. I will not stand in my own home and pretend to be the help so that you can feel important in front of your friends. The third friend, who had been silent until now, spoke up. This is really messed up, man. Daniel's face was now pale. Grandma, I'm sorry, You just what? You just thought it would be easier? You just thought they wouldn't understand? You just thought I wouldn't matter? Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. I have given you everything I had to give. Love, time, money, support, patience. I helped raise you when your parents worked. I paid for things they couldn't afford. I was there for every important moment of your life, and you repaid me by pretending I don't exist, by turning me into a servant in my own home. I think we should go, the blonde friend said, standing up. No, I said firmly. You should stay. You should eat the food. You should enjoy the game. This is still my house, and you are still welcome here. You have done nothing wrong. I turned to Daniel. But you need to leave. Now. Grandma, get out of my house. The words came out harder than I'd ever spoken to him before. He looked shocked, wounded even. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what I was feeling. You don't mean that, he said. I mean it. Take your lies and your shame and your embarrassment, and get out of my house. If you are so ashamed of who I am, of who you are, then you have no place here. Mrs. Chen, the blonde friend said gently, maybe everyone should just take a breath. Young man, I appreciate your concern, but this is between my grandson and me. You and your friends are welcome to stay, watch your game, enjoy the food. Daniel is not. Daniel looked around at his friends, then back at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head, see him trying to figure out how to salvage this, how to explain, how to make this okay. But there was no making this okay. Fine, he said finally, his voice tight. I'll go. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know you are, but sorry isn't enough this time." He left. The door closed behind him, and the house fell silent except for the sound of the game on TV. The three friends sat there, looking uncomfortable and shocked. "I apologize," I said, wiping my eyes. "This was not how I intended this afternoon to go." "Ma'am," the dark-haired friend said, "you have nothing to apologize for. That was—" "Wow. I'm really sorry he did that to you." "Yeah," the third friend added. "That was really not cool. I can't believe he tried to pass you off as, what, a maid? In your own house?" The blonde friend shook his head. "He's told us some stuff about his background, and now I'm wondering how much of it was true." "Probably not much," I said quietly. "My grandson has been trying to run away from where he came from for a long time now." They left soon after, each of them thanking me sincerely for the food and apologizing again for the situation. They seemed like decent young men. I wondered what Daniel had told them about himself, what elaborate fiction he'd created to explain his life. After they left, I sat alone in the living room, in the house that Robert and I built, surrounded by all the memories of our life together and the family we'd raised. The silence was deafening. Susan called an hour later. "Mom, Daniel just called me crying. He told me what happened. Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm not okay, but I will be." "He's devastated. He knows he messed up badly." "Good." "Mom, he's still your grandson. He made a terrible mistake, but he loves you." "Does he, Susan? Because people who love you don't pretend you don't exist. They don't erase you from their stories. They don't turn you into the help in your own home." She was quiet for a moment. "You're right. What he did was inexcusable. But he's 23, Mom. He's young and stupid and insecure. He's made a horrible mistake." "I have spent my entire life forgiving Susan. Forgiving your father when he worked too much and forgot important occasions. Forgiving you and David when you needed to move in and stayed for 3 years. Forgiving Daniel for gradually disappearing from my life. I have spent 73 years putting everyone else's needs and feelings before my own, but I will not forgive being erased. I will not forgive being turned into a shadow in my own home." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Daniel needs to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't just apologize and make everything okay, that some wounds don't heal with a simple sorry." "Mom, please. He's a mess. He wants to come see you, to apologize properly." "I'm not ready to see him yet." "When will you be ready?" "I don't know, Susan. I honestly don't know." That was 3 weeks ago. Daniel has called 17 times. I haven't answered. He sent text messages, long ones, explaining and apologizing and begging. I've read them all, but I haven't responded. Susan keeps trying to mediate, keeps telling me that Daniel is truly sorry, that he's learned his lesson, that he wants to make things right. David stopped by last week to check on me and told me that Daniel has been falling apart, barely eating, barely sleeping, consumed with guilt and shame over what he did. Part of me, the grandmother part, the part that held him when he was born, the part that loves him despite everything, wants to forgive him, to call him, to let him come home, to rebuild what was broken. But another part of me, a part I didn't know existed until that Sunday afternoon, is exhausted. Exhausted from a lifetime of giving and giving and giving until there's nothing left. Exhausted from being taken for granted. Exhausted from being loved only when it's convenient, only when it doesn't require any sacrifice on the other person's part. I think about Robert sometimes, about what he would say if he were here. Robert, who worked himself to death to give our family a better life. Robert, who believed that family was everything, that blood was sacred, that you forgave your loved ones no matter what, because that's what family does. But Robert never experienced what I experienced. He never had to stand in his own home and be introduced as the help. He never had to feel the humiliation of being erased by someone he loved. Yesterday, I pulled out the box of photographs from Daniel's childhood. There are hundreds of them. Daniel on his first day of school, me standing beside him. Daniel at his soccer games, me in the stands cheering. Daniel at his 8th grade graduation, his arm around my shoulders. Daniel and Robert in the garden, both of them dirty and smiling. In every photograph, there is love. Real love. The kind of love that shows up, that sacrifices, that never quits. I gave him that love freely, never expecting anything in return, except perhaps that he would know he was loved, that he would carry that security with him always. Instead, he learned to be ashamed of it, of me, of everything we were and everything we gave him. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll forgive him, if our relationship can be repaired, if things can ever go back to the way they were. I don't even know if I want them to go back, because the way they were clearly wasn't working. The way they were allowed Daniel to take and take and take while giving nothing back. The way they were enabled him to build his new life on a foundation of lies about his old one. Maybe this break is good for both of us. Maybe Daniel needs to sit with what he did, to truly understand the weight of it, to feel the loss of something precious that he didn't appreciate until it was gone. Maybe I need to remember that I am worth more than being someone's convenient grandmother, someone who can be included or excluded based on whether or not I fit the image someone wants to project. I am Margaret Chen. I came to this country with nothing and built a life with my own 2 hands. I raised a family in a house I helped construct. I taught my grandson to read, to be kind, to work hard. I gave him unconditional love every single day of his life. I am not the help. I am not a servant. I am not someone to be ashamed of. I am the foundation upon which his entire life was built, and it's time he remembered that. Last night, I had a dream about Robert. We were young again, standing on our empty plot of land, planning where to build our house. He held my hand and said, "This is going to be our legacy, Maggie. This will last long after we're gone." He was right. The house is still standing, solid and strong. But I'm realizing now that a legacy isn't just about the physical things you leave behind. It's about the values you pass down, the lessons you teach, the love you give. And somewhere along the way, I failed to teach Daniel the most important lesson of all, that you honor the people who came before you, who sacrificed for you, who loved you when you had nothing to offer in return. This morning, I woke up to the sound of someone on my porch. When I looked out the window, I saw Daniel sitting on the front steps, in the exact spot where Robert and I sat on our first night in this house. He was just sitting there, waiting, even though it was barely 6 in the morning. I watched him for a long time through the window. His shoulders were slumped. He looked thinner, tired. Every few minutes, he'd look at the door, as if hoping I'd come out. But he didn't knock. He didn't call out. He just sat there, waiting. The way I had waited for him so many times over the years. Waited for him to come home from school. Waited for him to visit. Waited for him to call. I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen table, still watching him through the window. An hour passed, then 2. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the yard. Daniel didn't move, except to occasionally check his phone, then put it away again. At 8 o'clock, Susan's car pulled up. She got out and walked over to Daniel, said something to him. He shook his head. She sat down next to him on the steps. Mother and son, together on the porch of the house where she grew up, where he was born. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I watched Susan put her arm around Daniel's shoulders. I watched him lean into her, and I watched his shoulders shake with what I knew were sobs. My daughter was comforting my grandson, both of them on the porch of my house, both of them part of my legacy, for better or worse. Susan looked toward the window, and our eyes met. She didn't wave or signal. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sadness, maybe, or understanding, or perhaps just exhaustion from being caught in the middle of this mess. After a while, Susan stood up and walked to the door. She knocked, and I let her in. "Mom," she said, "he's been out there since 5:30 this morning. He's been coming every morning this week, just sitting there, hoping you'll talk to him." I didn't know that. He hasn't been going to work. He told his boss he's having a family emergency, which I guess he is. She paused. "Mom, I'm not going to tell you what to do. What he did was terrible, unforgivable maybe, but he's destroyed over it. And I think maybe he's finally understanding what he did, what he lost." Understanding is not the same as changing, Susan. I know, but it's a start. I looked past her to where Daniel still sat on the porch. What does he want from me? To apologize, to listen, to do whatever it takes to make this right, even if he doesn't know what that is yet. Some things can't be made right. Maybe not. But maybe they can be made different, better. Maybe this needed to happen for him to grow up. I sipped my tea, thinking, he hurt me, Susan. In a way, I didn't know I could be hurt. He made me feel worthless. I know, Mom. And that's something he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life. But the question isn't whether he hurt you. The question is, what happens now? Do you want to try to rebuild something with him? Or is this the end? Is this the end? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about all the endings in my life. The end of my life in the old country, when Robert and I emigrated. The end of our youth, when we spent years saving every penny for this house. The end of Robert's life, when his heart gave out in the garden. Each ending had felt impossible at the time, like something I couldn't survive. But I had survived. I'd endured. I'd found ways to continue. But this felt different. This was a choice, not a circumstance. I could choose to walk away from Daniel, to let him live with the consequences of his actions, to protect myself from being hurt again. Or I could choose to do the harder thing, to open the door, to listen, to see if there was anything left to salvage. "Tell him to come in," I heard myself say. "But Susan, you stay too. I want a witness." Susan nodded and went back outside. Through the window, I watched her speak to Daniel. His head snapped up, hope flooding his face. He stood quickly, wiping his eyes, and followed her back to the door. When Daniel walked into my kitchen, he looked like a different person than the confident young man who had stood in my living room 3 weeks ago. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. His clothes were wrinkled. He looked like someone who hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. He stood in the doorway, not coming any farther, as if he didn't trust that he was really allowed inside. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the table. He sat across from me, the same seat he'd occupied thousands of times as a child, doing homework, eating snacks, telling me about his day. Susan sat to the side, present but silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. I looked at my grandson, really looked at him, trying to see past my hurt to the person underneath. "I'm sorry," Daniel finally said, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. There's no excuse for what I did. None. I was a coward and an idiot, and His voice broke. "I hurt you. I hurt the person who has loved me more than anyone in the world, and I did it to impress people who don't even matter. I made you invisible. I erased you, and I will never, ever forgive myself for that." "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did you do it?" He was quiet for a long time, struggling with the answer. Finally he said, "Because I was ashamed. Not of you. Never of you. But of myself. Of where I came from. At that fancy high school, and then in college, and now at work. Everyone seems to come from these perfect families with money and connections and legacy. And I felt like I was pretending to be something I wasn't. Like I was an imposter who didn't belong there." "So you tried to become someone else?" "Yes." I started changing my story bit by bit, leaving things out, adding things in, making our family sound more important, more wealthy, more, I don't know, more like them. And after a while, the lies became easier than the truth. The fake version of me felt more comfortable than the real version. And where did I fit in that fake version? He looked down at his hands. You didn't. That's the terrible truth. In the story I was telling, there was no room for a grandmother who was a cleaning lady, who spoke with an accent, who came from nothing. You made the story too real, too complicated, too honest. The words hurt, but they were honest. And there was something almost liberating about hearing the truth, finally, without any polish or pretense. When I told my friends you were the help, he continued, his voice shaking, I knew immediately that I'd crossed a line. I saw your face. I saw how much I hurt you, and I hated myself. But I'd already said it, and I couldn't figure out how to take it back without everyone knowing I'd been lying. So I let it stand. I chose my pride over you, and that's something I'm going to have to live with forever. Yes, I said quietly, you will. I know you probably can't forgive me. I know what I did is unforgivable. But I need you to know that everything I've told my friends since that day has been the truth. I told them everything. About you and Grandpa building this house. About you helping to raise me. About you paying for part of my college. About how you're the strongest, most incredible person I've ever known. I told them that I'm the one who should be ashamed, not you, never you. What did they say? They told me I was an idiot, that I'd thrown away something precious, that if I was ashamed of having a grandmother who worked hard and sacrificed everything for her family, then I was the one with the problem, not you. He wiped his eyes. They were right. I absorbed this, turning it over in my mind. Daniel had told the truth, finally. But the truth told after the lie had already done its damage, felt hollow somehow. Daniel, I said slowly, I have spent my entire life giving to you. My time, my energy, my love, my money. I gave it freely because that's what you do for family. You give without expecting anything in return. But what I did expect, what I needed, was to be valued, to be respected, to be honored for my sacrifices, not hidden away because I don't fit the image you want to project. I know. I don't think you do, not really. Because if you truly valued what your grandfather and I did for this family, you never could have introduced me as the help. Those words never would have come out of your mouth. Oh! He flinched as if I'd struck him. You're right. And I don't know how to make you understand how sorry I am. I would do anything, anything, to take back that moment. To have a chance to introduce you properly, to tell my friends about the amazing woman who raised me, who taught me everything important, who showed me what real strength looks like. But you can't take it back, Daniel. That's the reality. You can't unsay those words. You can't undo the choice you made to erase me from your story. And now I have to decide whether I can live with knowing that when it mattered, when you had to choose between me and your pride, you chose pride. Tears were streaming down his face now. I understand if you can't forgive me. I understand if you never want to see me again. But Grandma, please believe me when I say that I know who I am now. I'm not the person I was pretending to be. I'm Daniel Chen, grandson of Robert and Margaret Chen, who came to this country with nothing and built something beautiful. I'm the kid who was born in this house, who learned to read at this kitchen table, who was loved beyond measure by two of the most incredible people who ever lived. That's who I am. And I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of you. The words sounded good. They sounded genuine. But I'd been hurt too deeply to simply accept them at face value. Words are easy, Daniel, I said. The question is whether your actions will match them. Whether 6 months from now, a year from now, you'll still be proud of where you came from. Or whether you'll slowly start editing me out of your story again when it becomes inconvenient. I won't. I swear to you I won't. How can I trust that? He was quiet for a moment, then said, You probably can't. Not yet. Trust has to be earned, and I destroyed the trust we had. But Grandma, if you give me a chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I've changed. I will show you, through my actions, that I understand what I did, and that I will never, ever do anything like it again. I looked at Susan, who had been sitting silently through this entire conversation. She met my eyes and gave a small nod, though I couldn't tell if she was encouraging me to forgive him or simply acknowledging the difficulty of the situation. "I need time," I said finally. "I need time to think about whether I can move past this, whether I want to move past this. What you did cut very deep, Daniel. You made me question my worth, my value, my place in your life. And that's not something that heals quickly." "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll wait forever if that's what it takes." "You say that now, but people get tired of waiting. They move on." "Not from this. Not from you. Never from you." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. This conversation had drained me in a way I hadn't expected. "I think you should go now." The hope that had been growing in his eyes dimmed. "Okay, but can I come back? Can I call you?" I hesitated, then said, "You can call me, once a week. I may not always answer, but you can call." It wasn't much, but his face lit up as if I'd given him the world. Thank you, Grandma. I love you so much." "I know you do. I've never doubted that you love me. But love without respect is hollow, Daniel, and you need to learn that before we can move forward." He nodded, wiping his eyes again. "I will. I promise I will." Susan walked him to the door. I heard them talking quietly on the porch, and then the sound of his car starting and driving away. Susan came back into the kitchen and sat down across from me. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, confused, angry, sad. Everything all at once." "That's understandable." She reached across the table and took my hand. "For what it's worth, I think he really does understand what he did. And I think he's genuinely changed." "Maybe. Or maybe he's just sorry he got caught." "Mom, I know my son. I've seen him ashamed before, seen him sorry for things he's done. This is different. This has broken something in him. In a good way, I think. He's been forced to look at who he really is, what he really values, and he doesn't like what he saw." "Good. He shouldn't." "But Mom, eventually, you're going to have to decide whether you want to rebuild this relationship or let it end. And I can't tell you what the right choice is. Only you can decide that." After Susan left, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened, about Daniel as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, as a young man, about all the moments we'd shared, all the love I'd given him, all the hopes I'd had for who he would become. He had disappointed me in the worst possible way. He had shown me that even the people we love most, the people we sacrifice everything for, are capable of betraying us, of choosing their own comfort over our dignity. But he had also done something I hadn't expected. He had told the truth, finally, completely, without excuses or justifications. He had owned his mistakes. He had faced his friends and told them he'd been lying. He had sat on my porch for hours, day after day, just hoping for a chance to apologize. These were not the actions of someone who was simply sorry he got caught. These were the actions of someone who was genuinely trying to change. But was that enough? Could I forgive him? Should I? I thought about Robert again, about what he would say, and I realized that Robert would tell me to follow my heart, to do what felt right, not what was easy or expected. And my heart, despite all the pain, still loved my grandson, still wanted him in my life, still hoped that this terrible experience might somehow lead to something better, something more honest and real than what we'd had before. But my heart also needed protection, needed boundaries, needed to know that I wouldn't simply roll over and accept being treated poorly because it was easier than standing my ground. Over the next few weeks, Daniel called me every Sunday evening, exactly as I'd given him permission to do. I didn't answer the first 2 times, but on the 3rd Sunday, I picked up. "Hello, Grandma," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice just at hearing me answer. "Hello, Daniel." "How are you?" "I'm fine. How are you?" I'm working on being better. I've been seeing a therapist. talking about why I felt like I had to pretend to be someone else, where all that shame came from. It's helping. I hadn't expected that. That's good, Daniel. That's very mature of you. I'm also volunteering at a community center on weekends, helping immigrants who are learning English. It's made me think a lot about what you and Grandpa went through, coming here, starting over. I never really appreciated how hard that must have been. It was very hard, but we did it for our family, for our future. I know, and I took that for granted. I took you for granted. We talked for 20 minutes. It was awkward at first, stilted, but gradually it became easier. We didn't talk about what had happened. We just talked about life, about small things, about nothing important. But there was something healing in it anyway, in the simple act of communication, of connection. When we hung up, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I didn't know I was carrying had lifted slightly. He called again the next Sunday, and the next. Each time, we talked a little longer. Each time, it felt a little more natural. He told me about his work, about his friends, the same ones from that terrible day, who apparently had told him he needed to get his priorities straight, about the books he was reading, about his therapy. I told him about my week, about the garden, about the ladies from my book club, about small repairs I was making around the house. Normal, everyday things. The building blocks of a relationship. After 2 months of Sunday phone calls, Daniel asked if he could visit. "I won't stay long," he said. I miss seeing you. I miss being in the house. I miss you, Grandma." I thought about it for a long time before answering. Was I ready? Had enough changed? Could I trust him not to hurt me again? I didn't have perfect answers to those questions, but I realized I didn't need perfect answers. I just needed to be willing to try. "You can come for dinner next Sunday," I said. 6 o'clock. "Really? Grandma, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll be there. I'll bring flowers, or wine, or whatever you want." "Just bring yourself, Daniel. That's all I want." That Sunday, I cooked his favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables, the way Robert used to make it. I set the table for 2, in the dining room, where we'd had so many family meals over the years. Daniel arrived exactly at 6, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking nervous. He'd gotten a haircut. He was wearing a nice shirt. He looked like he was going to a job interview, not dinner with his grandmother. "Come in," I said, and he stepped inside tentatively, as if he needed permission to enter. He looked around the house with new eyes, really seeing it. "I'd forgotten how beautiful this place is," he said quietly. "I mean, I knew it was nice, but I'd stopped really seeing it." People often stop seeing what's most familiar to them. "Yeah." He handed me the flowers. "These are for you. They had orchids at the florist, and I remembered you saying once that they were your favorite." I had said that years ago. The fact that he remembered made my throat tight. "Thank you. They're lovely." We had dinner in the dining room, and it was strange and wonderful and sad all at once. Strange because there was so much history between us now, so much hurt that we were dancing around. Wonderful because he was there, in my house, and we were sharing a meal like we used to. Sad because we both knew things would never be exactly like they were before, and perhaps that was both a loss and a necessity. "Grandma," Daniel said as we were eating, "I need to tell you something." I braced myself, not sure what was coming. "I quit my job," he said. "What?" "Daniel, why?" Because I realized I was working there for all the wrong reasons. I was there because it looked impressive, because it paid well, because it was the kind of job that made me seem important. But I hated it. Every single day, I hated it. And after what happened with you, I started thinking about what actually matters to me, what I actually want to do with my life. And what's that? I'm going back to school, to get my teaching certification. I want to teach history at a public high school. I want to work with kids who come from backgrounds like ours, kids who might feel like they don't belong in certain spaces, and help them understand that their stories matter, that where they come from is something to be proud of. I put down my fork, surprised and moved. Daniel, that's wonderful. But teaching doesn't pay nearly as much as consulting. I know, I'll have to move to a smaller apartment, cut back on expenses. But Grandma, I'll be happy. I'll be doing something that matters. Something that would make you and Grandpa proud. We were always proud of you, I said quietly. Even when you disappointed us, even when you made mistakes, we were proud that you were ours. His eyes filled with tears. I know that now. I wish I'd known it then. We finished dinner and cleaned up together, working side by side in the kitchen like we used to. He washed and I dried, and it felt normal and right, and like maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back to each other. Before he left, he stopped in the living room and looked at the photographs on the mantel. The ones he'd tried to hide from his friends all those weeks ago. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." That day, when I introduced you as someone who helps out, what did you feel in that exact moment? I thought about it, trying to put words to the sensation. I felt invisible, I said finally, like I'd spent my whole life loving you, building this house, creating this family, and none of it mattered. Like I could disappear, and you wouldn't even notice because I'd already been erased from your story. He closed his eyes, and I saw him absorb the pain of those words. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. I forgave you weeks ago. The moment you told me the truth about why you did it, the moment you stopped making excuses, I forgave you in my heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. It means we build something new, something different, hopefully something stronger. I want that, he said. I want to build something better with you, something based on honesty and respect and appreciation for everything you've given me. Then that's what we'll do. But it will take time, Daniel. Trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it takes a long time to repair. I have time. I have all the time in the world. He hugged me before he left, a real hug, the kind that says, I love you and I'm sorry and I'll do better all at once. And for the first time in months, I felt hope. That was 6 months ago. Daniel comes to dinner every other Sunday now. Sometimes Susan and David join us, and we're a family again, eating together in the house that Robert and I built. Daniel started his teaching program and tells me stories about his classes, about the kids he's tutoring, about the joy he's finding in this new path. He brought a girlfriend to meet me last month, a nice young woman named Jennifer, who teaches at the same public high school where Daniel will start working in the fall. When he introduced me, he said, Jennifer, this is my grandmother Margaret. She's the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known. She and my grandfather built this house with their own hands, and she's the person who taught me everything important in my life. Jennifer shook my hand warmly and said, Daniel talks about you all the time. It's wonderful to finally meet you. I looked at my grandson, and he looked back at me, and I saw that he meant every word. He was proud of me, proud of our family, proud of where he came from. The journey from that terrible Sunday afternoon to now hasn't been easy. There have been difficult conversations, setbacks, moments when I wondered if we could truly rebuild what was broken. There are still times when I remember that day, remember how it felt to be invisible in my own home, and the pain catches me off guard. But there's also joy. The joy of watching my grandson become the man I always hoped he would be. Not a man who pretends to be something he's not, but a man who embraces his roots, who honors his family, who understands that real wealth isn't measured in money or status, but in love and integrity, and the strength to admit when you're wrong. I'm 74 now. This house is getting harder to maintain, and Susan has started gently suggesting again that maybe I should think about downsizing. But I'm not ready yet. This house is my legacy. It's proof that Robert and I existed, that we mattered, that we built something that will outlast us. And now, finally, Daniel understands that too. He understands that this house isn't just walls and a roof. It's a testament to love, to sacrifice, to the immigrant dream realized. It's the foundation upon which our entire family stands. Last week, Daniel brought over his old photograph albums from childhood. We spent the afternoon looking through them together, and he asked me to tell him stories about each picture. Stories I'd told him 100 times before, but now he listened differently. He listened with appreciation, with reverence, with the understanding that these stories are his heritage, his history, the truth of who he is. "Tell me about the day you and Grandpa bought the land," he said, pointing to an old photo of Robert and me standing on an empty plot, smiling despite our exhaustion. So I told him. I told him about the years of saving, about the sacrifices, about the dreams that kept us going through the hard times. I told him about the day we signed the papers, how we felt like we'd won the lottery, even though all we'd won was a chance to work even harder. And he listened, really listened, and I knew that this time these stories would stay with him. They would become part of his story, part of how he understood himself and his place in the world. Am I completely healed from what happened? No. Some wounds leave scars, and this one will stay with me always. There will be moments when I remember that afternoon, when I hear those words, "She helps out around here," and feel the echo of that pain. But I'm learning that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means integrating the pain into your story, letting it teach you something, and choosing to move forward anyway. It means understanding that people can hurt you deeply and still be worth loving, that mistakes can be opportunities for growth, and that sometimes the breaking is necessary for something stronger to be built. Daniel will make other mistakes. He's human, and humans are imperfect. But I believe he's learned something fundamental from this experience. He's learned that you cannot build a life on lies, that shame is a poison, and that the people who love you deserve your honesty and respect above all else. As for me, I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I've learned that I can set boundaries, that I can demand to be treated with dignity, that I don't have to accept whatever crumbs of love and attention people choose to give me. I've learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, even when doing so costs you something precious. I still live in the house that Robert and I built. I still wake up in the morning and look around at these walls and remember everything they represent. And now, when Daniel visits, he looks at these walls with the same appreciation, the same understanding of their significance. This house has witnessed everything: joy and sorrow, birth and death, love and betrayal, and forgiveness. It has held 3 generations of our family, and perhaps someday it will hold a 4th. It stands as proof that immigrants with nothing but determination and love can build something lasting, something beautiful, something that matters. And I stand as proof that grandmothers are not to be erased, not to be dismissed, not to be turned into convenient shadows when their reality becomes inconvenient. I am Margaret Chen. I built this house, I raised this family, and I will be respected. That's the lesson Daniel learned that terrible Sunday afternoon. That's the lesson he's still learning every day, in every choice he makes about who he wants to be. And maybe, in the end, that's the most valuable legacy I can leave him. Not the house itself, but the understanding that you honor the people who came before you. You tell the truth about where you came from, and you never, ever forget that love and sacrifice deserve nothing less than your full respect and gratitude. The house will stand long after I'm gone, but I hope the lessons will stand even longer.